Darren. Between Hi guys, I'm Scott Mansell from Driver61. And welcome to Tony Kanaan's stream for the IndyCar iRacing Challenge here at COTA. If you don't know Driver61, we are a training company. We train racing drivers in the real world and in sim racing, and our sim team have been working with Tony all week this week to get him up to speed in iRacing. He's relatively new to sim racing, and so we've been working with him on the nuances between real racing and sim racing. So we've just got 5 minutes remaining now in the practice session. Tony is running 24th at the moment, but we are just running on race runs at the moment to get his race pace up to speed. Lando Norris is P1 on a 43.141, really quick lap there. The circuit's quick at the moment. And Tony's on at 45.7, down in 24th, but we are hoping for a lot more during the race and qualifying sessions. So as always with practice, there's some trickery going on. The guys are using the push to pass. So we just finished the practice session now. That was an interesting session actually, where the majority of the quick lap times were done right at the beginning of the session. The circuit seemed to go away from the drivers, meaning it was more difficult to set a quick lap time. And Tony actually got quicker towards the end of the session, even though the track started to go off. We were not using the push to pass then on track, which can gain you maybe about half a second a lap here on the Kota circuit if you're using that push to pass along the big straights. So we're heading into qualifying now. 2 laps for the drivers. We are on board with Tony. Hi guys, I understand we're having a few technical issues with the audio here, so we're working on getting that fixed. Apologies for that. Tony is just in his qualifying session, as you can see. So we have Renus VK has completed his lap on a 44.7. He's quickest at the moment, but we've only had 5 drivers complete their laps. Tony's just done a 45, decent first banker lap for him. We should be pushing a little bit more on the second lap, trying to get a bit more from the car, and yeah, really going through it with pushing the track limits as far as possible. And here in iRacing, as in real world racing, using every inch of the track is critically important. However, every corner on the circuit is obviously has a steward watching it, and obviously you have the automated iRacing track limits, and so that can cost. It can completely exclude your lap. Tony's completed just his first lap. He's somewhere in the middle now. McLaughlin's just gone P1 on 44.2. Obviously, the drivers are coming through over the line now. Tony's P7, still on that 45.6. The pressure when you're qualifying like this is incredibly difficult, and I've noticed from going from the real world to sim racing as well. Actually, it can be more nerve-wracking in the sim than it can in real life, especially for Tony, who's has been racing for 23 years in kart and IndyCar. All that time, he gets in an IndyCar nowadays and it fits like a glove, whereas it's not obviously quite as comfortable in the sim. And also when you're racing in the real world, you have that feel, you have that, your sense is a feeling every single bump in the track, which you obviously don't get in the sim. We're just waiting for everyone to finish their laps now. Will Power's just gone P1 on a 43.8. That's fantastic lap. Norris just beaten him now, obviously coming over from F1 in the 141.4. Sorry, 143.46. So it's gone P1 by 0.4 of a second. So I'm just listening into coaches, Isaac, Balaj, and Josh, and they're talking to Tony about the brake pedal. Now, typically, when you go from a real car to the sim, the brake is where you find or lose the most time. It is the most difficult, and it's probably one of the most different things jumping into the sim, because you don't have the same feel in the simulator. The pedal there isn't exactly the same as real world, and so that is one of the most challenging things actually. When you do jump in the sim, it isn't just through feel that you feel the brakes. You don't feel the deceleration through your body. You have to memorize the amount of pressure that you put on the brake pedal. You have to memorize the kind of pressure and the amount that you push that brake pedal corner by corner, and that's quite a challenging thing because you're not getting feedback from the tires. You're not fully understanding what the traction is like with the car. Obviously, in the sim, you do have visual awareness. You can see when a tire locks up. You do have the audio that you're using in the sim, but you don't have that contact with the tarmac, and that can be very challenging. Hey Tony, how was that?
It's all right. I put a lap together, which is remarkable. So we'll see. We are starting 25th. So.
Do you feel there was any more time in that lap, or was it a good one?
No, I had a few tens, but I did. The off tracks are so easy to do that I just kept it safe. I mean, to start 22nd or 25th, it was not going to make a huge difference, but huge improvements from the beginning of the week. So we'll see. The race is what's count. So. So Scott, they were saying that to switch to the channel to talk to the fans. Are we live?
Yeah, Tony, we're live now. I'm just getting some feedback, so I can hear you talking over yourself a couple of times. So apologies if my response is a little bit delayed.
It's all right. We have 4 minutes before I can get in the car again.
Great. Okay. Well, we've got some questions from the fans. The main one, Tony, is what's the biggest challenge for you jumping out of a real life IndyCar and jumping into the sim? How have you overcome the differences, and what have you had to change?
I'm still overcoming. Everything is different. Although the cars are extremely similar, the track is extremely real. The brake pedal feel, the steering wheel feel, and then you have no. I mean, the race car drivers, we feel our things, in the car, in our butts. And here, I mean, mine's not motion. My sim doesn't move, so it's hard to guess what the rear of the car is going to do. So it's really easy for us to spin. We don't know what tire model or anything like that we have. So the biggest challenge is to understand my equipment and drive with what I have and make the best out of it. That's pretty much my biggest challenge.
Okay, Tony. Thank you very much. Sorry, I'm having some technical issues here, so good luck for the race. We'll be watching, and we'll talk to you afterwards. Thank you.
All right, thank you.
Hi guys, Scott Mansell back here from Driver61. So we're underway with the race. We're just sorting out my technical issues here. So I'll be able to speak with the engineers and Tony during the race and let you know what's going on. Hi everybody, Scott back here now. I think we've resolved technical issues here. So we're just in the warm-up here. Tony's doing some tyre testing. What's really important in iRacing here is to be careful with the tyres and how we're using the tyres. It's very easy to get the surface temperature in the tyres, and the way that iRacing models the tyre wear is through surface temperature, and then it wears the tyre. So if you lock a front tyre, if you get on the accelerator pedal too heavily and spin the rears up, then you can cause the tyres to wear very quickly, and then obviously you lose a lot of grip and a lot of time. So in that first stint of warm-up there, Tony was talking about this, and he was wearing the front a little bit too much. So it's through this section here, through turns 13, 14 and 15, where it's very, very easy to lock a tyre up, and that then obviously really compounds any issue with tyre wear and losing a lap of pace. So we're up in P20 at the moment on a 1:47, but we're just practicing race pace, so we're not going for the ultimate pace right here. Lando is in P1, 44.7, a great lap there with O'Ward and Karen P2 and P3. Askew's just popped up to P7 on 45.6, good lap there. So we've got some questions here that I wanted to answer from some of our fans. From Mark Phillips on Discord. He says, did Tony find it hard to adapt to the lack of motion in the sim, and have your other senses filled the gaps? Well, that is when you first jump in the sim, that is the biggest thing and the most difficult thing that you have to get used to. When you're out on the circuit, normally in a real race car, you've got the noise, you've got the bumps in the circuit, you can feel the surface of the circuit through the steering wheel, you've got all the G-force, you've got the feel in the brake pedal. And that's why when you jump into the sim, it's actually more difficult for a real-world driver because they're not getting all of these senses. You've only got your visual and your audio to understand what the car's doing. And it can be a very challenging thing. We actually helped Tony adjust his field of view in the car, which really helped him actually get a better understanding of the speed that he was carrying into the corners. And once we did that, we found an increase in the speed of the lap time, building better lap times with him, but also in the consistency. So that really helped things there. But yes, I wouldn't say that it fills the gap in the senses. But you learn to use maybe your visual and your audio senses a little bit more. Obviously, you've got the steering wheel, the feeling that you get through the feedback in the steering wheel. Tony's been using a SimCube wheel, which is obviously a high-level steering wheel, so he'll be able to feel the understeer in the car. He'll be able to feel the oversteer when the car rotates in the way that the force feedback is feeling through that steering wheel. When you get some understeer, you actually feel the top of the steering wheel with the maximum load in the tyres, and then you feel that it just go a little bit light when you get that little bit of understeer. On the other side of things, when you're getting oversteer entering a corner, for example, the steering wheel will just load up very slightly and then it will release itself, so you get that very natural feeling. Actually, I would say the precision in how the steering wheel feels is very similar to the real world. So we've had Josh Ladd join us. He's been working with Tony all week as a coach, training him on the proto circuit and the specifics of iRacing. Hi Josh, how you doing?
Hi, I'm good, Scott. How are you?
Yeah, we're doing well. So what's the feedback from Tony from the engineering side? How's he getting on?
He's getting on well. He's had a big improvement actually overnight. He's trail braking a lot less because he found he was eating up his tyres really fast by trail braking so much. So he's found a lot of pace. He's about 0.5 faster today. He had a strong qualifying for himself. We're a bit further down than we'd like. We're in 25th out of 33. So it's not too bad. But his race pace is a lot better than his qualifying pace. So we're really happy with that. And we think a top 10 could be possible if we stay out of trouble.
Great stuff. So just going back to the trail braking, this is obviously, and I'm talking about this coming from the real world to the sim, this is obviously something that you would typically do a lot in the real world. And it's one of those habitual things, one of those natural things that it's just very difficult to kind of get your head around. As we've been training Tony this week in iRacing, we've discovered that actually as you're coming into the bends, we require less trail braking, less braking pressure to get the car to work. Josh, what are some of the issues if you do trail brake too far into the corner?
Yeah, so in iRacing, if you trail brake too hard into the corner, you are at a big risk of locking up your front inside tyre. And especially in this IndyCar, if you lock up your front tyres, you're going to really eat away at that rubber, and it's going to affect your tyre wear dramatically. So you could be dropping 0.7 to 1 second a lap when you get to the latter half of your stint.
Yeah, and obviously once that tyre wear and the imbalance is probably more the thing. If the fronts are going, but the rears are kind of holding in pretty well, that imbalance just means the car's very difficult to drive, especially through the first long chicane and coming around turn 16, 17, 18 at the end of the lap. Once you get some push through there, it's very difficult to get any lap time out of the car.
Yeah, it's actually quite interesting because if you're trail braking too much, you end up eating through your fronts, and then you're going to have understeer, and then you've got to actually trail brake more to counter that understeer, and that's just going to eat your fronts even more. So it's like a chain reaction which occurs.
Yeah, that's true. How does the tyre wear actually work in iRacing? Does it register the lockups, or is it just a kind of heat tyre?
So iRacing doesn't register a flat spot at all. So when you lock up a tyre, it sort of just adds a multiplier to the tyre wear for that tyre. So if you're constantly locking up your front left, for example, there won't be a flat spot. But if you go into the data, you can see you have 10 to 15% less tread on that tyre at the end of the stint.
Right, and then iRacing is correlating that lack of tread to lower performance, right?
Yeah. So in the iRacing system, in the setup page, it gives you a tread remaining percentage for each tyre, and it tells you the left side, middle, and right side for the tyre, and that just has a percentage. So it'll start 100%, and around 50%, you start to see a severe drop off. I think the race is actually starting as well, so I'm going to hop out in a second. Is there any last questions?
No, that's all, Josh. You get going, get on track, and good luck.
Okay, thank you.
So starting in the position back here in 25th, obviously there could be some incidents at the beginning. So Tony's going to just be a little bit careful in the first lap to see if we can make up positions. Obviously, we don't want to get caught up in somebody else's mistake.
Kepler 9, car, Kepler 45, car, Kepler 59, car, Kepler 4, car. Slow car ahead. You got a slow car on the right. You got a slow car on the right. You got a slow car on the right.
Okay, so here we are on the warm-up lap, the green flag lap. We should have a race of 32 laps around Kosa today. Tony's starting from 25th, a bit further back than we would have liked, as Josh mentioned. However, Tony's race pace is stronger than his qualifying. These IndyCars in iRacing are a very challenging car to drive. The limit is pretty difficult, so we're just going green now.
Still there.
So we've had a decent start. Everyone's actually remained clean. It's great news.
Left side. Stay on the right. Right side. Stay on the left. Stay on the left. Stay on the left. Clear on the right. Car on your left. Still there, hold your line. Clear on the left.
So Tony just clipped one of those yellow curbs there on the inside, but it doesn't seem like he's got any damage. Seems okay.
Right side, you're in the middle, 3 wide. Right side, 2 wide. Clear on the right. Car right, clear on the right. Car stops on the right.
We've got a bit of chaos going on here. Oh no, Tony's been tapped around, unfortunately. Lots of stuff happening there. We've got a little bit of damage on the car, so we're going to be pissing this lap.
Car on your left, clear.
So we've dropped down, we've got a little bit of damage, and we're going to come into the pits and repair that now. At the front of the field, we've got Lando P1, Power P2, Rosenquist P3, O'Ward P4. So Tony's saying that the damage doesn't seem that bad, so actually maybe we can stand that. However, we need to get to the S's first, really, the high aero load section of the circuit to understand. Yeah, so it looks like we're going to have to box.
Clear on the right. You got a slow car on the left.
So we're boxing, lap 3. There's going to be a competition caution on lap 12. So if you don't know what a competition caution is, it's something that we don't have in the real world, but it's basically a planned safety car period. So it means that it's going to bunch the field up really somewhere in the pit stop window. Just to keep things quite interesting. So actually getting some damage and dropping down, we have P27, isn't too much of a problem because everyone's going to be bunched back up during that 12. So now Tony's just trying to focus on some good race pace laps for this first part of the race. Now that we've got some clean air back here, so it would be a good opportunity for me to answer some of the questions that we got sent to us across our various social media platforms. We've got a question here from Tanapat in Thailand through YouTube. He asked, what is the definition of consistency to you? And this is something that I've noticed in sim racing actually. Although sometimes we may not have the pace there, during a race, if you're very consistent, it means that you can often pick off many places during the race because of the lack of consistency of some of the other drivers. So a consistent driver in the real world would get within 2 or 3 tenths of a second a lap, every single lap. And obviously that is affected by the way that the tyres start to degrade, differences in the circuit. But you'll gradually feel these things start to go off. And that is one of the things, when you're driving the car on the limit all the time in a consistent way, you become very aware if the car is losing traction because the tyres are degrading, if the balance in the car is disappearing, because you're constantly getting feedback and information from the car. And actually in iRacing here, in this IndyCar, you can very easily feel that happening. I think Tony's just had a bit of an error going through 16, 17, 18. Really tricky part of the circuit actually. The car's generally rear limited through there. With the aero, it can be very skittish on the rear of the car. So to all of those who are watching on YouTube, if you do have any questions, let me know in the chat. I'll answer them the best I can. Like I mentioned, we have been working with Tony all week, and from Driver61, as we're bridging the gap between sim racing and real world racing and training, we have a lot of experience in understanding how to make sim drivers quicker and real world drivers quicker, and going in between the two is actually absolutely fascinating. So one thing we've really got to take care with is, because we've had a couple of spins with these tyres and the tyres slid across the circuit, iRacing will wear the tyres quite quickly, which is, you'll then feel the balance of the car go off, the overall grip go off, it becomes more difficult to drive, and so on. What we ideally wanted to do was to push this sim as far as we could have gone. But with this extra tyre wear, we're going to have to probably pit a little bit earlier, I presume. So now the most important thing that we need to do here is to stay on the lead lap. So when we do have that competition caution and the field come back together, we'll be good to go. So if we can get the pit stop done just before then when the competition caution happens, we'll be able to take the most advantage of that. So just at the to update you with the positions, we've got Norris P1. He's 3 seconds ahead of Will Power, who is followed by Pato Ward, who's 6 seconds off the lead. So those front three are fairly close together. They're all in the 45s, high 45s. Lando is pulling away slightly, and then the rest of the guys are in the 46s. So we've got a question here from Toxic Iron. Thank you very much. You always want to push the car as much as possible, but it doesn't wear out the tyres quickly to push the car to the limit all the time. How do you balance tyre wear and pushing? Yeah, well, that's a great question, and especially with this tyre model. So a lot of it depends on the simulator. A lot of it depends on the specific tyre model within that simulator. So in iRacing, there's a couple of models going on. With this specific tyre model, it's the older tyre model in iRacing, you can't just push the car all the time. So if you're talking about driving the car on the limit, or slightly over the limit, so when you see the corrections, you add a little bit of steering lock into the car, if you get on the accelerator pedal too much and you get a little wheel spin, that's all wearing the tyres more than you really want. So we've actually done lots of testing with our team of drivers where we drove aggressively, right on the limit, we drove at a moderate aggression, and then we drove to try and save the tyres as much as possible. We then collect all of that data and try and understand the tyres as much as we can, so we can understand then what the best strategy is for the race. And with this tyre, it seems that if you do push it over the limit just a fraction too much, the tyres will fall away, the grip will fall away at the tyres very quickly. So ideally, for this tyre model, you want to drive just below the limit, only just because obviously if you're going too far below the limit, we're losing lots of time on the track. But just below the limit to save those tyres and extend that period where they're good and working well before they drop off for as long as possible. The question from Andy Barnsley there: are the pit stop times a managed standard for tyre change or bodywork, etc.? So it depends if there's damage. Obviously, it's like the real world. So if you have some damage, it's going to take longer. If you want to put more fuel in the car, it's going to take longer. But the tyre changes are standard across all the cars. Tony's actually got some decent race pace here. He's on the pace to be just inside the top 10 if we hadn't made these few mistakes here. So lap 9 and a couple of laps will be coming into the pit stop window with that competition caution coming at lap 12. So stay tuned, there's going to be some action coming up with everybody diving into the pits, I think, because we think that that's the optimum strategy. So we've got a question here from Gabriel. I believe sim racing is a way to train or gain experience, but is there some kind of data on one's ability to say if he or she can try to race in the real world? I don't think there's any kind of data analysis that you can kind of just look at it and say that someone will be quick in the real world, because obviously it is different, right? You can use it for training, but it is a little bit different because of the sensors and the feel, and obviously the consequences of making a mistake in the real world are significantly more. However, what I will say is when I see a driver that's transitioned between sim racing into the real world, and the very quick sim racers, our coaches, their technique and the way that they process information is very, very similar, pretty much the same as a quick driver in the real world. So I would say, in answer to that question, yes, you can see if a driver is going to be quick, most of it, but you really have to get them in a real world car to really understand if they are going to be able to produce good performance in the real world. So at the front, Lando's extended his lead slightly to 4.7 seconds. He's consistently quickest on track. Power's second, and Award is P3. So we've got a question from Carlos here. Do you use that dynamic seat simulators or a normal chair? I think you mean the motion platforms, right? I don't. Tony doesn't either. I think they can be useful. I've used them a few times, but never in the kind of way that you see on the internet where the motion platform is moving lots and lots. That's too gimmicky. I think if it is going to move, if the platform is going to move, it only needs to move just a little bit, a fraction, to give the idea, understanding when you get on brakes, when you turn the car, these little hints at what the car is doing. That's where the motion platforms become useful, but it certainly doesn't need to be moving around massively. It's just tiny little pieces, because if you think about the real world, when the car dives, it only dives just a little bit, and when it rolls, it only rolls, a few centimeters. Tony's lapping, going back to that consistency question, Tony's been lapping between 2 or 3 tenths of a second in terms of consistency. So his race pace is going well actually. We just need this stop and competition caution to happen to bunch the field back up. Hopefully then he can keep his nose clean. So Norris and O'Ward have just pitted on that strategy just before the competition caution. So from Toxic, I've got another question. I have a more beginner question. The RPM meter goes from green to yellow to red. Is there a reason for that? Or is it just a warning, or is there some ideal time to shift in there? Well, that's a great question actually. You can actually see the lights. They'll go green, yellow, red, and then blue. But this is all mapped out in software before. The engineers who set when those lights come on will know exactly where the peak power is in the car, and that's the ideal time to shift. So you're getting the most power from the engine. I don't think there's any reason that they are that colour. I think it's just to kind of increment the warning that you get. But you'll typically change when they start to flash blue. So you can see on Tony's steering wheel now we've got the yellow flashing lights. This is the caution period, the safety car period. Once all the field get bunched up together, they'll open the pit lane, and I believe that we'll be doing our pit stop then. So it means that we will lose some track position because everyone will come past, but because of the incident that we had earlier on, it's not too much of a problem. So we leave it as late as possible so that we've got the peak of the tyre performance for as long as possible during the second half of the race. So that's 13 out of 32. P27 at the moment. I think we're pitting, if we can, this lap. Yeah, we can see that everyone's bunching up together now, so they'll open the pit lane. So we couldn't hit that lap. Obviously the field aren't bunched up enough together at the moment. We're also trying to save fuel during this competition caution, so we have to put less fuel in then during the pit stop. Okay, so we've got a question here from Potato Racing. So I registered for the sim racing training course in the Driver61 website, but where could I book it? Okay, so non-IndyCar related question here. You should have received an email earlier on about our training programs if you've registered. So just contact us if you haven't received that, and we'll get it over to you. So Will Power's at the head of the field now. However, he hasn't pitted yet. So we'll be pitting this lap, and then it's really important when you come out just to be as good with the tyres as possible. It's so easy to begin to wear these tyres and get an imbalance in them. So we have to try and save as much fuel as possible, and typically that's through coasting as much as you can. Now that's a little bit different than in the real world, but the way that iRacing works out the fuel consumption is on throttle position. And so if you can be on 0% throttle position coasting along, then it saves more fuel.
Pit road is now open. One to go, next time by.
So we're going to box this lap. We will be shuffled then to the back of the pack, but we'll have fresh tyres, and hopefully we can keep our nose clean. Always the difficulty here when you're in the traffic, as you are, especially in sim racing, where there can be a little bit more contact than you might have in the real world. Difficult to keep your nose clean when everyone's in that train.
One to go, next time by. Line up, single file. Left up, 28, car by.
So Tony will just be focused on saving as much fuel as he possibly can now, not putting anywhere through those tyres, so that we have the peak ready for when the race gets restart again. One of the interesting things that we've had to work on in iRacing here is the brake bias. Now, the brake bias is the differing force between the front and the rear tyre. So you imagine when you get on the brakes with a single pedal, you can apply different force to the front of the car as opposed to the rear of the car. So if you see a driver locking up their front tyre all the time, they can use a switch on the steering wheel to put more of that pressure to the rear tyres, and that will create a better balance and actually more efficient braking when you're slowing down into the corner. Now, what was specifically interesting with iRacing is that you can actually use an extra bit of brake bias on the rear of the car to make the car turn in some of the slower corners. So where it might normally understeer, the front pushes on, if you add a little bit of rear brake bias there, it actually makes the car turn into the slower corners. You can actually gain quite a lot of time. Now, that then creates problems in some of the bigger braking zones, like into turn 1, where you're going uphill into a hairpin, turn 11 and turn 12 on this coaster circuit. But what you can do in this image, you can actually map one of the dials to change this brake bias and move it forward and backward in between corners. So that's the level of detail that Tony's driving to. You would do that, of course, in the real world, but he's also doing it in the simulator. He's got a little button mapped on the steering wheel where he just moves it a few clicks forward or backwards depending on the corner and the kind of attitude of the corner as well.
Jetstar 28 car.
So the other layer of complexity here, especially when the pack is all bunched up like this, IndyCar's got a push-to-pass function, so it means that you get a increase in power for a limited amount of time. We only have 10 of these to use during the race, and so there's a strategy there to using them at the right time, whether that's to attack or whether that's to defend. At the beginning or at the end of a caution period like this, obviously you're going to be using them to defend because everybody will be using them. So here we go, green, green, green. So we should be trying to use the push to pass on the following straight after the hairpin. We're up to P27. When going back to the tyre wear, when you're in the traffic like this, and it happens in the real world as well, because you've got a lack of aerodynamic force because you're following somebody, or people going off in front of us, because you've got a lack of aerodynamic force because of all the drivers in front of you creating a wake in the air, the tyres will be scrubbing across the circuit a little bit more. We've got a car spinning in front of us, up to P26. Okay, Tony's making some good progress now. Got driver off at turn 1 up here. Got Award P1, Dixon P2, Herta P3. This car, in 2 cars in front of us, has some front wing damage, I think, because it's so slow through the chicane there. Yeah, it's slowing us down, so could have another position here.
Still there.
Big move from Tony there, 2 of them on the inside with P21. So I can hear Tony talking to our coaches. He's very happy with overtaking 2 cars going into that area. Good job. You just gotta keep up this pace, but without locking those front tyres up. As soon as you lock those front tyres up, it costs us time and lots of tyre wear, which will affect us later in the sim. So we're up to P19 now. We've got another car just up the road, Rossi, P15, who's lost his wing, so we should be able to pick somebody else off. We've got these 3 cars up ahead of us. Rossi in the pink car is slow. I think he's lost half a wing, the engineers are saying. So he should be holding everybody up. We've got a load of drivers coming into the pits there, so we should make some positions up. So all those guys were just doing 1 stops, whereas we've got a different strategy to that. So we're up to P10 now because of all those drivers, but we are going to have to take another pit. We've got Veach up ahead of us, but he is more than a second slower than us on the last lap, so we're catching him quite rapidly. So we've got a question here about how you train for the sim. Tony has spent a good amount of time in the simulator. Because you don't have the same sensory inputs coming into you than you have in the real world, you have to memorize the speed, the braking profile a lot more than you would do in the real world. Because in the real world, you're touching the limit, you're feeling the tyre on the track, and it's actually if you're a talented driver, it's actually easier to get up to speed in the real world because you get loads more information from the car and from the track. So in terms of training for this, you have to do a lot of laps so that you can get comfortable in the car. Now I have found with some of the newer tyre models in iRacing that this feeling in the tyre is much better, it's much more realistic, and so it means that you can feel a lot more, and if you're already comfortable and have the right technique in a real world racing car, you can jump in these cars and be on the pace a lot more quickly. With this older tyre model, I think that you have to just memorise quite a lot more than you would have done in the newer tyre model. So we're up to P7 now. Up to P7, however, we are going to have to pit again. So, question from Toxic Iron: is there a required number of pit stops? I don't believe so, but having said that, the strategy just wouldn't work. The tyres would just be finished, and you'd be losing so much pace over that period. So 1 stop was really for this race the fewest that you could do. However, a 2 stop, we believe, is a little bit quicker. And the two-stop strategy against a single stop is always a bit more exciting because you have a shorter period where you're on those tyres, so the peak is there for a little bit longer. You can use the tyres more. However, obviously because you have to stop, you lose time in the pit lane. So when you're doing that with an extra stop, it makes your race exciting because you drop behind and then you've got the tyre to catch them back up again, and you've got to do the overtaking manoeuvres on the wheel drive. So we're up to P6 now, but we do have to stop again. We've got Rosenquist behind us, but he's on a different strategy, just overtaking Tony now. Tony's got into the flow of things a lot more now. He's much more consistent. His pace is improved. So I've got some good hopes for the second half of this race. Got Bourdais behind us, and then Remus VK just behind Bourdais. Lap 21 of 32, so just 11 laps to go now. Got a question here from Cryptic TMG. Does your in-game field of view affect confidence more or less in the real world? To be honest with you, I don't know about that. I use VR headset. Tony's using a widescreen monitor. All I do know is that when he was running the wrong field of view, once we got that set up properly with him, he was much more consistent. There was an adjustment period for him, but once he got used to it, he was much more consistent and actually a little bit quicker. I think that if a driver is used to the real world driving and they're using the sim as a supplement to their real world driving to sharpen themselves, to just train on the new circuit and so on, I believe that the VR headset is probably the most natural for them because they're used to seeing things in 3D. If you have a single screen, you obviously only have a 2D display. Now, I was just speaking earlier to one of our coaches and he was explaining that he just loved using a single screen. But he's always been a sim driver. He's used to it. He's very comfortable with just a single image. Whereas for me, most of my experience is in the real world, and so for me it's easier to use a VR headset where the depth perception and the immersion is a bit more than a 2D screen. So we are P6. 23 laps out of 32. Rose and Chris in front of us by 3 seconds. Winner's DK behind. Catching slightly, but he's only half a second lap quicker than us at this moment. So we'll have to see where we are once things shake out. The other two stoppers, I think some of them are pitting right now. So we won't get a clear idea of this until 3 or 4 laps from now, once everyone's pitted. So we're going to be boxing this lap. Tyres, a little bit of fuel just to get us to the end. There's only 9 laps remaining, so Tony's going to be able to push really hard on these tyres until the end. Still need to be really careful with those lockups because they really do kill the tyres, but he's going to be able to push hard, so the pace should be good. Okay, so that's dropped us down to P19. Might be a few people in front of us still to pit. Oh, had a spin out the pits on the slightly cold tyres there. It's really tricky actually in testing when we were going through there. When you come out of the pits, the rear tyres take a little bit of time to come up to temperature. Particularly tricky through that high speed chicane section. So awards P1, allow P2, Rosenquist P3, Norris P4, McLaughlin P5, VK P6. So there's a bunch of people pissing right now. That's popped us up a couple of positions. We've got Pagenaud behind us, second back. He's got good pace, so it's going to be a good race actually between Tony and Simon. One of the questions that we get asked quite a lot with the lack of real-world racing is whether these drivers spending so much time on the sims, is it going to be difficult for them to get back into their typical driving style when they get in the real world? And with the amount of hours, obviously some habits are going to form. The technique between driving in the real world and the sim, obviously it depends on the sim and the car model within that sim. So the technique is slightly different, and compounding, doing so many laps in practice and so on in the simulator, obviously that will have some effect on the driver where they're absorbing this technique and this different style into their nervous system. However, I will say that as soon as Tony does jump back into a real-world IndyCar, I think very quickly he'll forget the sim racing technique. And you know, these drivers are some of the best in the world. They're changing their technique depending on the track surface, the track itself, the weather conditions, and so on. So they have the ability to assess what's happening with the car and adapt very quickly. So I don't think that it will be too much problem. So we're up to P17 now. Good second stint. Just 7 laps to go. So Tony's pace at the moment is on a 46.3. That is quicker than everybody in front of him up to 7th. So we can actually get some positions here if Tony keeps up this pace. We've got Dalton Kellett next up the road, 1.6 in front. Tony was 1.1 quicker than him on the last lap. The next two, Rossi and Jack Harvey, just in front of those guys, they are 7 and 8 seconds further ahead, respectively. That's going to be touch and go as to whether we can make that happen. It depends on their strategy and how quickly their tyres are going off. So let's watch Tony catch Kellett just up in front. Hopefully it'll be an exciting end to the race. So we've got a question here. Is it just me, or does accelerating uphill make your tyres spin very easily? Well, not going uphill, not in the bottom of the hill. However, if you're coming up over a crest, yes, it will make the tyres to spin quite easily. Because what you need to think about is how much load is going through the tyres. When the tyres being pushed harder into the circuit, it will have more grip because there's more friction there. If you're going up over a crest, when you go over that crest, there's literally less force, less load going into the tyre, and so it will have less grip, which is why if you are going up over a crest, it may wheel spin more easily. So there's a crash just up ahead. Rossi and Harvey seem to have come together and they've both got damage. So we lost a couple of positions there. So 5 laps to go. P18, Pagenaud in front. We think he's got some front wing damage. Rahal behind still has some front wing damage as well. This is the thing on this circuit, actually, coming through the quick chicane section. On the inside of the curve, you've got those yellow, we might call them sausage curbs in Europe, but they're actually even more aggressive than a sausage curb here. They're basically there so you can't use too much track, and it will take the front wing off very easily in this low IndyCar. Okay, so there's a position with Dalton Kellett up to P17. Pagenaud 2.6 ahead of us.
The lead is pitting now.
So again, Tony's race pace for this last section of the race is very good. 46.8, been pretty consistent apart from the little errors that we've seen. Pagenaud's 3 seconds up the road. And this is where the difference in strategy comes into play. Some of those slower cars up ahead might have been on the single stop strategy, and so the tyres are getting to the end of their life, they're struggling, they just haven't got the grip to keep everything together. Whereas those on a two-stop strategy, obviously they'll have had less wear go through the tyres and they can push a little bit harder, deeper into the race. And with the few mistakes that we've had, that's the issue with going from real world to sim racing. Some of the feel isn't there all of the time, and so it is very difficult to be consistently on the edge. So a lot of the skill that you're looking for when you're sim racing is minimising all of these mistakes, because you make a little mistake, even if it's getting the car sideways coming off a hairpin, it will cost you half a second, 5/10 of a second. So obviously if you have a spin or a half spin, that's going to cost you a significant amount of time. You accumulate those over a race distance, make 4 or 5 decent sized mistakes, and then that makes a big difference obviously on your performance. So P17, we've got Jack Harvey ahead. His last lap was 3 seconds slower than Tony. So I presume he's made a mistake or we've got some damage. We think Harvey ahead has got some front wing damage. His top speed's down a little bit. Looks like he's understeering. You can see him missing some of the apexes. Now in iRacing, if you have a spotter, you can jump from car to car, so you can actually see the front view of Harvey there, and you can see that the front wing is missing. Tony's just gone into the final turn a little bit too hot there, trying to overtake Harvey. When you go in on the brakes deep like that, the car rotates, which means that it oversteers, and it's very difficult with this specific tyre model in iRacing to bring it back. It's quite tricky. I think we might have some front wing damage. So look out for the car understeering slightly. You'll see, Tony, you will have to add a little bit more steering angle than we really want to. Two laps to go, including the one that we're on. So at the front and the back, we've got Norris. He's taken P1, followed by Award, and Rosenquist P3. So with all of that excitement, we drop down to P21 now. Max Chilton behind us. Okay, that was a questionable overtaking manoeuvre there by Chilton. So we're on the last lap now. We think we've got some damage front wing and probably a little bit of suspension damage from the contact there with Max Chilton. Ed Carpenter in front of us, who's lapping at 49.6. So even with that damage, we might be able to get in here. I think we've got a push to pass remaining, so we can get a little bit of time. It's worth 2 or 3 tenths down the straight. Catching on him in the braking zone, so which is the trickiest part of sim racing. So Tony's doing a good job on the brakes there. Half a lap to go. We've got to make a move in the last sector of the track. Okay, I think the tyres are finished with a couple of spins there and a bit of contact that we had really affects the tyres. So it's quite difficult to feel, and they go off very quickly with that increase in surface temperature. Okay, so we've finished P23, a race in which I believe we could have been close to the top 10, in the top 10. Had a few little issues there, but once you have one spin on those tyres, they really start to fall off, so it can be very challenging. So guys, Tony is just going to join us in a few moments once he's jumped out the car, have a chat about the race, see where we can find some improvements for the final race of the season.
So, boys.
Hey Tony, how you doing?
Frustrated, man. It's you know, I thought I was gonna do better. We had a lot of work done this week, and it didn't. So that's very frustrating.
I think that second half of the race, you had really strong pace. Obviously, we were a bit unlucky with some of those incidents, especially at the beginning as well. But
yeah, I mean, we prove a lot since I got you guys at Driver61 this week. I mean, it's been 5 days. I improved like 3 seconds of my time, so it was really it's just obviously want more and more and more, and the mistakes that I'm making are still very rookie mistakes. Trying to understand. I was saying, talk about the feel of the rear of the car that I don't have. The car has napped on me a few times. That
yeah, we had some questions through the YouTube channel and some of the other social media channels asking about the feel between the real world and the sim, and I went part of the way to explain the differences in that it actually is harder in the sim because you don't have that feel in the rear of the car.
Yeah, I mean, that feeling when where is the rear? Where am I gonna catch it? When am I gonna catch it? It's I don't have it. I don't have it, and that's costing me, all these races. But I guess the only way to get better, it's really do this more and more and more. I mean, I did an average of 9 hours this week, 9 hours a day this week. So it's been, a heck of a lot of work. I have good coaches. I feel really bad to disappoint them, but
well, we'll
on to the next
analyze
one.
all this data. We'll see where we can improve, and then going into the next race, obviously, we'll spend a lot of time working on that and trying to get that feel in the rear of the car, because it is really difficult, especially once we've pushed those tires a little bit hard and the balance starts to go. It just disappears, doesn't it?
Yeah, I mean, and that's the biggest, challenge, to save the tires, and also when they start to go, to understand how hard I can push or not. So it's been frustrating, but I've been around for a long time, so that is just the way it is. So we'll keep working on it.
Good job, Tony. Thank you very much for joining us, and we'll catch you in a bit.
I want to thank the viewers for watching. I'm sorry I cursed, but I was really mad at myself. I want to thank the coaches. You guys are amazing. So we'll get better next time.
We certainly will. Cheers, Tony. I'm going to answer some of the questions on the YouTube. We'll let you go and do whatever you've got to do with the other stuff. And yeah, cheers, man. Catch you in the next
Cheers,
race.
mate.
Cheers.
Yep. Cheers.
Okay, guys. So there we have it. The Indy iRacing Challenge from Kota. There's another road race coming up. We'll inform you about that. Hopefully we can talk to Tony during the race of that one as well. Apologies again for the technical issues at the beginning of this stream. I hope you've enjoyed it, and we'll catch you next time. Cheers and goodbye.